to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mrs. Cron, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Casper?
Here.
Mr. Deming? Here. Mrs. Miller? Here. Mr. Adoma?
Here.
Mr. Sarnes? Mrs. Schmidt? Here. Mr. Thompson?
Here.
Mrs. Yardley? Here. Dr. Yarnell?
Here. Thank you. At this point, we will have comments and questions from guests. I have 3 names on the list. First name is Mr. Linden.
Robert Linden, West Rockville Township. I'm here tonight because I'm adamant about my opposition to the expenditure of any school taxpayer funds to East Rockville for the infrastructure. School taxes are meant for education, not entertainment. East Rockville taxpayers should pay for the trail in East Rockville. Leave the Pennridge, the other Pennridge communities alone. In fact, East Rockville should be paying the school district for the flexible easement, whatever that means, over the school property. School property belongs to all Pennridge communities, not just East Rockville. East Rockville plans or intent were to milk the school district out of $71,000 in January of this year. That was their express plan. Did it change? Just go to the Pennridge pot of gold for money. What's their intent now? Still to get money from the school district? Was this some kind of deal made toilets for trails? Or the construction of the field? Was this a way to trade favors for taxpayer dollars? I think there was. I would hope that the Bucks County District Attorney would look into this matter. It wouldn't be the first time something smelly happened here. As a taxpayer, I vote no on motion A1.
Thank you, Mr. Linden. Next name on the list is Matt Heitzman. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Do you wish to speak for the special board meeting or for the curriculum meeting?
I was going to talk before the curriculum.
We will have another public comment then, so we'll wait for that. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Third name is Mrs. Banis Clemens.
Hi, I've been talking to a lot of people in the district, and pretty much every single conversation that I have with anyone in the district starts with concerns about the clearances. And I think that everyone understands and wants to err on the side of caution and respects that the district is doing that when it comes to most of the clearances. I think the biggest concern that people have is the TB test and the fact that the district is requiring that specific test for all volunteers. If a list went out to all of the schools, to all of the principals in all of the schools, giving a list of what clearances were required for what activities. And even if someone wanted to sell baskets at the holiday shop, they would have to get a TB test and the other clearances just to go in to sell something at a holiday shop where they won't really even have interaction with the kids. And so it's getting to a point where, you know, there's being cautious, and then there's kind of putting things on people that aren't actually going to help protect the kids, and it's just causing extra aggravation for parents and for our HR department that has to process more things. The other thing with the TB test, you can get a false positive. And for people who have moved here from a different country, who have already been vaccinated for TB, they will actually, in most cases, have a false positive test. And there's several people in this district that this is happening to. Also, if you have different kinds of diseases that affect your immune system, you can also get a false positive. And then what happens is these parents have to go and get chest x-rays. to prove that they do not have TB, and then they have to bring all of this paperwork and all of these medical records to try to justify that they don't have this just to be able to go on a field trip with their kids. And I think people are thinking that's excessive, because you're asking volunteers who may just be going on a field trip with their kid. You're asking them to take off 2 days of work to go to one appointment with their doctor to get the test, another appointment to have the test read. Many people don't have health insurance, so then they're paying for it. And then if they have to get a chest x-ray to prove that they don't have TB because they have a false positive, that's another added cost that they have to pay for. And, you know, it can even go further than that. So I think the issue is if you're having parents who are maybe volunteering to go on a field trip to a museum with the class, you're having them take this TB test, but then you're sending those kids to the museum with 500 other people who haven't had a TB test. So you can't test every single person they're ever going to run into. And at this point, I just, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many of the people that I talk to, the TB test is just overkill, and I don't think that it's adding any extra protection. It's only adding aggravation. And by adding that test, you're also adding more work for HR, and that test is we're only requiring it now. We're moving it based on what happened in the policy meeting. We're moving this every 5 years. I mean, having this test done or these chest x-rays done every 5 years just to be able to prove you don't have TB to go on your kid's field trip is excessive. We're losing volunteers. We actually, I don't know if you're aware of this, we have principals who are doing lunch duty in some of the schools because they don't have volunteers who are able to come in, and in many of those cases, it's because of this TB issue. So we actually have principals who have much more important things to be doing than handing out forks and spoons in our cafeterias. And, you know, I think that the TB test is something that hopefully we could change for our volunteers. It's definitely understandable for people who work in the district, but for people who are volunteering for one thing here or there throughout the year,
It's not even required for
I
waitresses.
just think that that's excessive.
I know, but there's state law for school.
Thank you.
I
Mr.
can
Cox, do
oppose
you have any comment relative to this from a legal perspective?
Well, I can say that the speaker's comments are not lost on me. I've been working with Ms. McHale over the past few months trying to standardize the district's process with respect to background check requirements and TB test requirements for volunteers. The first thing I would say is that the requirements come from the state, and the school district, which derives its authority from the state, has to follow those rules. So I understand that the requirements are onerous, but I would suggest that the district, in all cases, in most cases, if not all cases, is simply following what the state legislature and the regulatory authorities have required. With respect to volunteers specifically, the requirements are, the more onerous requirements are new. And so there is still some gray area with respect to both background checks for volunteers and TB tests for volunteers. Until the regulatory authorities, PDE and the Department of Public Welfare, issue more specific regulations, there's likely to be some gray areas. What I have recommended to the administration is that until those gray areas, those murky areas, are cleared up, the district ought to err on the side of caution. And I can give you some specific examples where I've advised them. With respect to, say, holiday shops, which I understand occur at some of the district schools, especially over the holiday season. One of the questions that came up was, do volunteers for those events need to have clearances? And my advice was yes, they do. If they're having interaction with students on a volunteer basis, if there's something other than a visitor, they have to have clearances and TB tests. The question came up for vendors. do vendors have to go through those requirements if they're going to be on school property? They're going to be selling things, potentially operating tables, interacting with students in that way. And the question was, well, why would vendors need to have clearances if the parents who are just simply bringing their students, not volunteering, just bringing their children to the event, if they don't have to have clearances? And my advice to the district was that the law is not exactly clear about whether vendors are having direct contact with students. But on balance, my view was that if you have a vendor that's going to come onto school property and has been convicted, say, of child sexual abuse, you would want to know that in advance. And so, yes, it may be difficult or onerous for that vendor to submit a clearance before coming onto school property. But I think on balance, it's a safer, more cautious approach on balance. And so that's sort of how we've come down on that question for now. And until, PDE or the Department of Public Welfare issues guidance that says, a vendor who's just going to be on school property for one day for a couple hours, there's going to be supervision at the event, there's going to be volunteers and staff supervising all of the children at that event. No, that vendor doesn't need to get clearance. Until that occurs, my advice to the district is to require it. And again, the approach I've taken is let's look at the potential worst case scenario. And if someone has been convicted of a serious crime against children, we would want to know that in advance. So I don't know if I've answered all of your questions or Dr. Yarnell, all of yours. But to the extent the district is applying these new regulations fairly strictly, in significant part it's because of my advice after consultation with the administration.
I think everybody understands with the testing for being a sexual predator that you would want that for vendors. The concern is the TB test specifically. And based on the policy as written by the Pennridge School District, when I was looking over the policy, it appears that one-time volunteers are not required to get that TB test, but it seems to be being enforced as though it is. So I'm wondering where the disconnect is there. And also, there are elementary schools that are having functions that are not necessarily run by the school, but they're being held in the schools. And those, they were excused from these clearances, but then other schools, such as North Middle School, has an event that's the exact same scenario, and they're not being excused, and now they have to cancel that event. So, and then just one more thing is the other school districts are not enforcing it. There's many other school districts that are not enforcing it the way that we're enforcing it, as far as the TB test specifically.
Well, let me try to take those one at a time.
Put your mic on.
The first issue that
Can you turn your mic on, please?
The first issue that you raised was with respect to the Pennridge policy regarding TB tests for volunteers. I don't know exactly what the policy says because I don't have it in front of me. But my advice on the TB test has been based on the Pennsylvania regulation that was promulgated by PDE. And what that says basically is that if a volunteer is having direct contact with a student, and that's not defined exactly very clearly, but if they're having direct contact with a student, then they need to have the TB test. So the requirement may be subject to a Pennridge regulation, but the advice I'm giving is based on my interpretation of the Pennsylvania Department of Education regulation. And so the distinction I would draw would be between a parent who's volunteering, say, for a field trip, and is accompanying a first grade class to the Philadelphia Zoo, for instance. I think it's pretty clear that that individual has to have a TB test. If they're coming in to watch their child perform, like in a room like this, then they're just a visitor, and I think the requirement is more relaxed for that individual. With respect to whether schools are implementing the policy differently, I don't know for a fact how every school in the district is implementing the background check or TB test requirement. But as these new regulations have come out, I suspect that in this school district and in other school districts there have been just some growing pains in terms of figuring out what exactly the requirements are, having them implemented on a consistent basis in every school within a particular district. My advice has been, as I've mentioned here, that all schools, basically implement both the background check and the TB test requirement in the same way and consistently throughout the entire school district. And I would expect as the school district gets a full year under its belt with these new regulations and laws in place that the process will become more uniform. And then with respect to what other school districts are doing, I can't comment on that other than to say, with respect to the two school districts that I represent and advise, I'm advising them in the same way, which is to err on the side of caution until there's more clarity with respect to what exactly the law requires.
Just one follow-up. When you said you're not sure how that there's growing pains as far as the different schools in our district enforcing them, this came from the administration. This was something that was sent directly to the principals that made a decision based on every single event and what will or will not be required. And so the ones that I was mentioning that were different for the elementary school versus the middle school, those were decisions that were made all from our district office, and there was just that discrepancy as far as how it's being enforced, and different scenarios that are basically the same, getting different answers.
Well, I can say that to the extent I've been involved, I've observed the administration making an effort to implement the requirements on a uniform basis.
Anyone else would like to comment before we start the meeting? If not, we'll move to the next item, which is PSBA recognition. Dr. Radigan.
I've been asked by the Pennsylvania School Boards Association to make the following announcement. The legacy of school board service is firmly embedded in the history of our nation and its commitment to public education. School directors today have a challenging job in our complex society, giving more and more of their personal time to this non-paid volunteer effort. Since 1983, the Pennsylvania School Board Association has been recognizing the contributions of dedicated local school directors with long-term service. School directors are first recognized when they reach 8 years of service, and again every 4 years thereafter through the Honor Roll of School Board Service. The Honor Roll is the association's way of saying thank you to those individuals who exemplify leadership and statesmanship, giving unselfishly of their time and talents for the future of our public schools, and putting something back into their local communities through the guidance of the education of youth. 2 of our board members are being recognized this year. Dr. Peter Yarnell was recognized out at the Hershey Conference by receiving a plaque for 24 years of service to the school board. And Mr. Bill Sarnes is also being recognized for 12 years of service with a certificate. So could we have a round of applause for both of those gentlemen? At one of our last meetings, we also recognized 2 of our board members who are no longer going to be with us, and one of the individuals was not able to be here that evening, so Dr. Yarnell would like to make a presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Radigan. We have 3 outgoing school board members. Obviously, among those is Mr. Thompson, who was not here at the October board meeting. I wanted to make sure that he was recognized for his service. Mr. Thompson came to the board in December of 2011 and immediately became board president. He has been our strongest advocate, I believe, for the 21st Century Learning Initiative that has been undertaken in this district. He's been extremely involved in both curriculum and technology, particularly with an effort to that. He also has been one of the strongest supporters of the summit that was held in the district several years ago, and which we plan to do again in the foreseeable future, and also on the comprehensive plan that was put together a few years back. So I want to thank David, as all school board members. They come with special strengths of their own, and I think these are the things that are particularly positive about Mr. Thompson's service to the school board. We'll miss him. However, I understand that he is willing and hopefully will continue to be involved in the 21st Century Learning Initiative, the task force that Dr. Scheid has convened. And I do hope that he indeed takes that role and continues to run with it. So, Mr. Thompson, if you would come down.
Thank you. Round of applause for Mr. Thompson. Mr. Thompson, I'd just like to personally thank you for sharing my passion about the 21st century learning and also for all your support over these last few years. Thank you.
At this point, we'll move to the committee reports. The first one is facilities. Mr. Casper.
Thank you. There's one item on the agenda, one motion. A motion to allow the administration to write a letter of support to East Rock Hill Township regarding the expansion of the trail project through the school district property and to make a payment of $1,000 in support of planning for this project.
Do we have a second to the motion of Mr. Casper? Thank you, Mr. Deming. Moved and second to approve the letter of support and the $1,000 for supporting the planning of the trail project. Comments or questions from board members? If not, all, yes, Mrs. Yarden.
I'm just wondering why it's on this agenda, not the December 1st. It was just, and there are no minutes available from the meeting. I'm asking anybody, whoever can answer the question.
Well, I personally looked at the agenda. We put everything on here that was essentially open, as we do on special board meetings often.
And they made their presentation at our last meeting.
And there's
I don't know if you were there or not. I don't think you were.
I was not, and there's no minutes, and there's no information in the board
Well,
packet, like there's no attachment.
well, it's the same. I don't want to make a case for it. I think we should put it to vote, and if you don't want to vote for it, then don't vote for it. That's all I can add.
Anyone else? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 7-1. Mr. Casper?
That's the final motion. Thank you.
The next meeting is,
It's not listed on here, but I think it would be probably in December after we reorganize.
okay, thank you. Finance Committee, Mr. Sarnes. Mr. Sarnes is not here tonight, so I will read these motions. First motion is to approve the nutritional services contract for the period of July 1, 2014 through June 30, 2018. Do I have a second to that motion? Second. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Moved and seconded to approve the nutritional services contract. Comments or questions from board members? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. The second motion is a motion to approve the amended contract for Dr. Robert A. Davis, MD, and this is to provide bus driver and student physical exams. The contract is amended to change the bus driver physical rate from $35 to $45 per exam. This was a correction that was observed and needed to be consistent with past practice. Comments, or do I have a second to that motion? Thank you, Mrs. Schmidt. Moved and seconded, I'm sorry, Mrs. Yarden. Moved and seconded to approve this amended contract. Comments or questions from board members? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Next comes the Personnel Committee. Mr. Regomo.
Thank you. Personnel Committee, there are 8 motions. First is the motion to approve the Superintendent's Personnel Report, EDR report, dated November 16, 2015.
Do we have a second to that motion? Thank you, Mrs. Schmidt. Moved and seconded to approve the Superintendent's Personnel Report and the EDR report. Comments or questions from board members? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion carries 8-0. Mr. Goldman?
Second motion is to approve James P. McGoldrick, Adult Evening Instructor Retirement Planning for the 2015-2016 school year.
Do we have a second to that motion? Thank you, Mrs. Schmidt. Moved and seconded to approve Mr. Goldrick as an adult evening instructor. Comments or questions from the board? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Mr. Regomo?
Third motion is to approve the amendment to Act 93 agreement for the 2014-15 through 2017-2018 fiscal years. Article 4, fringe benefits to provide hospitalization, major medical plan coverage equal to the 300/600 plan as adopted by the PEA effective January 1, 2016 in the form attached to this agenda.
Do we have a second to that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Moved and seconded to approve an amendment to the Act 93 agreement. Comments or questions from board members? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Mr. Regomo?
Motion 4 is to appoint Mr. Ron Taylor as acting principal for the South Middle School effective November 17, 2015 until January 20, 2016.
Do we have a second to that motion? Mr. Demming, thank you. Moved and seconded to approve Mr. Taylor as the acting principal for South Middle School. Comments or questions from board members?
I do.
Yes, Mrs.
Thank you.
Miller.
I'm asking, number one, is 4 and 5 the same motion? They're two different? I'm sorry, okay. I'm sorry. So, it's number 4. I'd like this tabled. I just feel there's been some questions raised and we don't have enough information to support this decision, so I'm asking that this be tabled. Am I too late?
No, you're not too late, but you
I've been in
have
the
to get
process.
support for it.
Yeah, right.
You need a second for that?
To table it, we do.
I'll second.
Okay. Moved and seconded to table this motion. At this point, I'll ask the board to vote for or against it. Voting for it means it will be tabled. Voting against it means it will not, and the motion will go forward. So all those in favor of tabling the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Opposed, Mr. Regomo? I didn't hear what you said.
I was in the favor of the table. My apologies.
Okay. Mr. Dillon?
I pass.
Okay, so you abstain. So we have 3 in favor, 3 in favor, 3 against, and 1 abstention. Sorry, 4 in favor. Let me count again. Mr. Casper, Mrs. Yardley, Mrs. Schmidt, and I have voted yes, or no to the motion, but yes to moving forward. Mr. Regomo, Mrs. Miller, and Mr. Thompson have voted no, basically, or yes to the motion, to tabling, but no to the motion. And Mr. Demming has abstained. So the motion to table fails. Now let's go back to the motion that's on the floor. Are there other comments or questions from board members? If not, all those in favor of this motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Opposed.
No. So Mr. Demington, did you vote aye or? Okay, so the vote is the same, Mrs. Cron. 4 yes, 3 no, 1 abstention.
Why has he got his microphone?
Now we'll see if that's a legitimate.
You need 5 votes for that motion.
Okay, so it is failed. is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay,
And Dr. Yonell, then we can actually move on to the next one.
okay.
Because
So
that
you're
will
withdrawing
affect, that will affect motion 5.
Okay, so you're withdrawing that. We can move on to motion 6, however, right?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Gilmo, we are now to motion 6. 4 and 5 have been removed.
Motion 6 is to appoint Dr. Christine McKee as acting principal for Diver Elementary School effective December 1, 2015 until January 4th, 2016.
Do we have a second to that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Moved and seconded to appoint Dr. McKee as acting principal for Diver Elementary. Comments or questions from board members? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Mr. Gilman?
Motion number 7 is motion to approve the 2015-16 salary for Dr. Jacqueline Radigan, Superintendent of Schools, retroactive to July 1, 2015.
Do we have a second to that motion? Thank you, Mrs. Schmidt. Moved and seconded to approve the salary increase for Dr. Radigan. Comments or questions from board members? Mrs. Yardley?
Can you just, I mean, I know we had a discussion about it, but I just wanted to be clear what the amount of the increase is.
The increase is 2%.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Yardley.
Anyone else?
What's the dollar amount?
Or have other comments? No? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Mr. Regoma?
Motion to accept the recommendation of the superintendent to terminate the employment of employee number 477 effective this date in accordance with section 5-514 of the school code and for the reasons set forth in the statement of charges contained in a letter from the superintendent to employee 477 dated June 12, 2015.
Do we have a second to that motion? Thank you. Moved and second to terminate the employment of employee number 477. Comment or questions from board members? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Mr. Regoma?
The next personnel committee meeting is scheduled for January 13, 2016.
Thank you. That concludes the committee reports. The announcements for tonight's meeting are that the next regularly scheduled school board meeting will be on Tuesday, not Monday, but Tuesday, December 1, 2015 at 7 p.m. It will be in this room, and it will involve the annual reorganization of the board as well as the regular voting meeting for December. Executive sessions were held on both November 9th and November 11th for the purpose of personnel matters. At this point, we are back to comments or questions from guests.
I know it's too late because you already voted on this, but to Mrs. Yardley's point about there being no minutes for the facilities committee meeting and the vote that took place today, I was at that meeting, and Mr. Casper had recommended to Mr. Nyman that, or suggested to Mr. Nyman that this was going to be tabled for about 6 weeks or so because this is going to be an ongoing process, and he would rather put this before the new board that we were going to be having. So I was actually surprised that it was up for a vote today because the suggestion was that this issue wait and be voted on after the new board is in place.
Anyone else like to comment? This is Furlong.
Don't want to do that.
A couple of questions. Sue Furlong was, whoops, here we go.
Put your microphone on, please.
Yeah, here we go. Sue Furlong, West Rock Hill Township. A couple of questions. What is the dollar amount of Dr. Radigan's new pay?
Total dollar amount?
Yes, sir.
Total dollar amount?
Yes, sir.
The current pay is $168,000, and I believe it's $33,60 that's added to that.
Okay.
30,360, my apologies.
30,000?
No, 3,360.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, that's not, anyway, the percentage. And what was the date of the letter connected with the firing of employee so-and-so?
June 12th.
June 12th? And on the EDR report, what positions were included in that report and at what pay? Just give me a brief rundown and any names associated with that.
Mrs. McHale, do you have that? Is that something we could send to Mrs. Furlong?
It's on the agenda and you don't have the information here?
Well, I have to find it again.
Well, you got a computer.
I would be more than happy to email the list.
There are two band people,
Let me have those two, please.
jazz band director substitute, both are and lab band director substitute.
Okay, what's the name there?
Kevin Fair,
Spell the last name?
F-E-H-E-R.
F-E-H-E-R, okay. And what were the other positions?
There are 3 mentor positions for specific teachers in specific times, one at South, one at West Rock Hill, and one at Sellersville.
Okay, may I have that sent to me, please? And the other thing I'd like to kind of point out, policy became an issue. And I believe that if it's on the agenda, a copy of the policy at the meeting would be a wise thing, preferably I would think by the HR person when it pertains to HR. And if you don't bring it, every last one of you has a laptop in front of you, and the policies are on the district website. Somebody should be able to retrieve that within a reasonable amount of time while the discussion is being held and clarify it so that people walk out of the room knowing what's going on. Otherwise, put your laptop away and get your yellow legal pad back out.
Thank you, Mrs. Furlong. Anyone else? If not, questions from the press? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned, and we will reconvene in about 5 minutes for the curriculum committee meeting. Thank you for coming.
It's on the agenda. Was it? I made that comment at the meeting. You didn't say you were going to do anything. This is the truth. It's all fixed. I can't wait till that stupid ass kid gets
Hmm? Oh, that piece of flotsam.
I can't get the internet.